Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for the Marvel animation series, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Deuces, Parker out.
Such a nerd.
Hello, I'm J-Law, but you can call me Justin, and if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast covering the world of movies, TV shows, toys, collectibles, gaming, and all things geek-centric. Joining me for today's web-slinging, spoiler-free review are your friendly neighborhood geeks, Meg Chambers, Darcy Hudson, and the guy in the chair, Nate Shelton. How we doing?
I love it.
There always has to be a guy in the chair.
I'll be the guy in the chair. That means I don't have to stand up and walk around and move and stuff. That's fantastic.
I don't know. I feel like if Nate was a guy in the chair, he'd be relying on ChatGPT way too much.
It's true. I just program a Nate guy in the chair bot.
And he will be in the other chair in the bathroom.
Playing some video games.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a full house today. So if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to just roll us right in to talking about this show. But of course, let's give our listeners a little setup. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man follows Peter Parker on his way to becoming a hero with a journey unlike we've ever seen before in a style that celebrates the character's early comic book roots. The talented voice cast includes Hudson Thames, Coleman Domingo, Eugene Bird, Grace Song, Zeno Robinson, Hugh Dancy, and Charlie Cox. The head writer is Jeff Trammell. Mel Zwyer is the supervising director. Brad Winderbaum, Kevin Feige, Luis D'Esposito, Dana Vasquez Eberhardt, and Jeff Trammell serve as executive producers. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the 10-episode animated series, launches today, January 29th, exclusively on Disney+. Now, the release strategy is a bit different. Today, you're going to be getting the first 2 episodes. Then next week, on February 5th, you're going to get episodes 3, 4, and 5. And then on February 12th, the week after, you're going to get episodes 6, 7, and 8. And then on February 19th, you will have a 2-episode season finale with episodes 9 and 10. A huge thanks to our friends at Disney Studios Canada and Marvel Studios Canada for giving us early access to all 10 episodes of this show. We were able to watch it in its entirety, and we have thoughts. We have lots of thoughts. I'm sure all 4 of us are on here, so there's things to be said and shared. And I think there's no better place to kind of kick off the conversation about the show than with its look and feel. I think the animation style for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is an absolute love letter to the classic Spider-Man. It's definitely drawing on inspirations from Steve Ditko's iconic art style, and it visually embodies the spirit of the original comics while incorporating that Marvel animation signature blend of tradition meets innovation. I think, again, this is another excellent example of a show that captures the moving comic book aesthetic with bold color palettes, stylized panel transitions, motion lines that bring things to life. It's that 2D, 3D hybrid animation that strikes a perfect balance between comic book authenticity and modern cinematic vibrancy, offering a visual experience that feels very fresh, very dynamic, and it just invokes a sense of nostalgia while staying energetic and action-packed. It was an absolute joy to watch this and experience it from the aesthetic. I know, Meg, as someone who very much appreciates animation, the art of animation and what goes into it. How did you feel from the vibes of this show, from its aesthetic?
Yeah, I remember seeing back in 2022 when they originally announced that this show was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And the moment I saw the designs and the aesthetic of what the backgrounds were going to look like and the character design, I was so intrigued. It very much plays homage to the comic book style of illustration, but they took what they've built with shows like What If in the animation aspect of it. So they're taking these almost 2D comic book designs, but forming them into a 3D animated show. And I will say the first episode, I was a little jarred by it. it felt very
Staccato?
flat color wise
Yeah.
and very staccato.
Yeah.
But then the movements were like fluid because it was this 3D molded animation. So it just took a little bit of getting used to. But by the time I was done all 10 episodes, I was like, okay, season 2, I'm ready. Let's go.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I think Megan, like yourself, like I think seeing the initial character designs, and I remember we saw like so many different like suits for there was that big splash page of all the suits for Spider-Man and just all the different ways that the villains could look and what have you. And it was really exciting to sort of see the character design. I'm with you though. I think when the first, even I would say for me, first two or even probably first two episodes, I wasn't fully on board with the look of this show, just in its motion. I think coming off of some of the other Marvel animation projects like X-Men '97, What If season 3, in its maturity, right? We got to see how it's matured, or even shows outside of the Marvel animation banner, like your Arcanes, your Blue Eye Samurais. I felt like it was very, like you said, it was a bit empty. It was a bit clean. It gave me vibes of GameCube era cell shaded Spider-Man video game, and I kind of liked that, but then I also kind of didn't because I felt like there just wasn't enough movement on screen in terms of background characters and what have you. But as the show went on, I started liking it more and more. And especially in my conversations with Darcy, talking about Steve Ditko's art style and understanding what they were going for, they nailed it 100%. And I think, it does look like a comic book come to life. And for me, what really sealed the deal for going from not really digging it to absolutely falling head over heels for it was the very moments that they gave you the comic book panels on the screen at the same time. I just was like, okay, knowing what I now know about the Steve Ditko art style, looking at some of that imagery, because I was never that big into the classic Spider-Man comics. It completely turned me around on it. So I think if anyone is feeling like you or I did going into this show and sort of being like, I'm not sure how to feel after a couple episodes, give it a bit of time and also look at the source material because they are absolutely killing it.
Well, I think it goes further than Steve Ditko just inspired designs, which is clearly evident. I think when we had the chance to sit down with Jeff, he talked about how his Spider-Man was the animated Spider-Man from the 90s. And just even not only that show, but all those show that came in from the 60s. If you look at the backgrounds in those, they're very, void of characters because Spider-Man is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing that elevated to a modern take in this show. And I think it's just from the get-go, I'm like, Spider-Man and the characters around Spider-Man are the focus. That's why the backgrounds feel empty, is because we're focusing on these characters first and foremost. And it's such a delight going on this journey with again, the movement they bring to the screen is just, delightful.
I think there's a lot of like slower frame rates with the animation. It's anywhere between, I haven't clocked it, but it feels like anywhere between 12 to 8 frames,
Mm-hmm.
which is like old school animation. And to your point, Darcy, it's very 90s, 60s. Like it's that older style of animation. Whereas obviously now, as you mentioned, Nate, with a lot of more traditional, faster frame rate animations, there's more fluid action, and you get that in fight sequences. But it's interesting in the sort of just the conversational moments, the moments of more mundane life and nature. It does feel a little slower, and I think that's what's really going to throw people off on those, like as you said, like for probably the first 2 episodes, is they're not necessarily going to really connecting it. But it does feel like they went for something that was definitely to call back to a different style while still bringing a modern and fresh look to that aesthetic, if you will, right, with the sort of 3D 2D blend of the animation. So I think there's probably some experimentation that happened in some of these episodes, but I think for the action, at least, when you do get a lot more of that hard-hitting action throughout some of the later episodes and stuff, you do see a little bit more of that fluidity and that quickness that you would come to expect from animated choreographed fights, if you will. So yeah, I think they properly placed this the sort of speed ramps and the speed boosts, if you will, in the right areas where it needed it, versus some of the more mundane moments where it's just about like living in the moment of this world.
Well, and I think it's fascinating to sort of recognize, as we've been on this journey for us as a podcast and looking at these shows, it's fascinating to sort of be able to recognize intentionality in a show. And I think that is it, when you're able to recognize and see that, oh, these things that maybe we're not used to, they're not a mistake. They're very much the intention of what they're
Tension,
going
yeah,
for.
exactly, yeah.
It's cool. I also want to call out the music. I think the music is absolutely dope in this show. I think the intro over the, like, first off, the rocking Marvel banner is so cool,
Love it.
with the animation, the Marvel animation banner. But then Neighbor Like Me by the Math Club, Relay and Mellow is really, really cool. I think it's such a fantastic update to the classic theme. And it was one of those things where I never wanted to skip the intro, especially because when you get a few episodes in, you start to notice that the intro reflects what's going on in that particular episode. And I think that's such a cool way to continue the whole aspect of bringing in the feeling of a moving comic book, right? When you pick up a comic book off the shelf, you look at the cover to understand, okay, what's the big moment that I'm going to be looking forward to in this story. And they managed to do that with the freeze frame at the end of each intro, which, never made me want to click that, skip
It
forward
Yeah,
button.
it felt like the splash page after you open the cover,
Sure.
right? With like with the big sprawl and the who it's written by and all the details, the credits and stuff like that. Because the it feels like as they move through and as you get to that, like it's pretty traditional in regards to like keeping the visuals the same, and it's right up until the end there when they throw in that you know different picture or that picture that is associated with it. But
Which
just
is
going
which are where they are straight up copies of famous covers too. They're
exactly
not just paying like referencing stuff. They are covers that we
covers, yeah.
have picked up off the shelves, just with
Mhm,
this Spider-Man in the place
mhm.
of the original one, which is so cool.
Yeah, and just going off on the theme song, I think the theme song is the perfect embodiment of what this show is. It's it's calling back to what made Spider-Man so great from the '60s while giving it a modern, fresh twist. And I think that the theme song is a perfect embodiment of what this show is meant to do in a lot of ways is to kind of bring in new elements with familiar aspects that we know and love from the character.
And I think, again, just one last thing for me for the look and feel when it comes to those familiar elements. And I think we'll be talking about this in all aspects of this show, especially with the story. But I do love. We were talking about the movement earlier. I'm recognizing moves from the video games. I'm recognizing moves that Toby has done. I'm recognizing moves that Andrew Garfield has done, that Tom Holland has done. And it's really cool to see how these animators have paid such close attention to detail when it just comes to the movement of how Spider-Man gets around in
Yeah,
a scene.
yeah.
And it works so well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that that's again, it goes back to what I said at the top here. It's the show is a love letter to Spider-Man, from Spider-Man fans, and it shows in so many ways. And in a lot of ways, it comes down to some of the voice actors that are featured in this show, the performances and the characters. Let's talk about some of these characters. Let's kick things off and talk about Hudson, who lends his voice as Peter Parker, Spider-Man in this show. He's reprising his role because he was in What If as the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man, and he was in the Zombies episode. And yeah, like I think Hudson is definitely bringing, in my opinion, he's bringing a Tom Holland esque approach to his voice, but there's new tendencies, there's new emotions there that I think he's exploring because this is obviously another character of Peter Parker. You know, you've mentioned it, Darcy. We do have some interviews out now on our YouTube channel and on podcast feeds. And you guys had the chance to talk with Hudson, and
Yeah.
he talked about this idea of the different iterations of Spider-Man that have existed and what he wanted to do and how he found that voice in a sense of optimism. And I think that is such a great sense of character to kind of anchor his Peter is optimism, and at this early of a stage as a hero discovering himself, optimism is sort of the thing that you need to have. And I think you hear it in the way he approaches. There are moments where things get a little down, and I think we get to see the emotions that Hudson gets to kind of play with, but he is definitely leaning into that optimism and that sort of young, spry Peter Parker. And I think it's working really, really well. I feel like it's very relatable in a lot of ways.
Well, I also just love that he's a big old nerd. You know what I mean? Like I think that is so intrinsic to Spider-Man, and I feel like, I think the Andrew Garfield, I always felt like he was a little bit too cool, and Tom Holland I even think is a little bit too cool. I think this is taking me back to like original Toby for me, of that sort of dorkiness, tripping over himself in a few moments. But it's really cool to see how Hudson, just over these 10 episodes, is able to take the character and show the difference in his tone and confidence between when he's Peter Parker and when he is Spider-Man. And I love getting to see the ways that those two characters, who are one and the same, are similar, but
Yeah,
also getting to see the differences in them as well. And I think Hudson does a really good job giving us all the quips. They're just as quippy as you'd ever want, and we really get to see him grow and adapt, and I'm excited to see that happen in further seasons.
I just on that note though, I do feel like though with Hudson's performance and more so than maybe it is more Toby in the sense, but it does feel like Peter Parker and Spider-Man, even though yes, they are one and the same person, they are different characters to a certain
Mhm.
degree, because that idea of how he represents himself when he's in the mask versus when he's not. And I think that is sort of a staple when it comes to like a hero preserving their identity. But it feels like this show is like it is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but I feel like in a lot of ways it's a Peter Parker show in a lot of ways as well, right? Like I know that, again, as you mentioned, it's one and the same. It does feel like this is more of a Peter centric focus than just being Spider-Man.
Mm.
Mhm. Well, I think it's the coolest thing about Spider-Man is that, especially the era that we're exploring in this show, is when Spider-Man's just starting out. He's a kid, like a boy on like merely 15, 16, not most type thing. And he's calling himself Spider-Man when he puts his mask on and trying to be the ideal hero he sees himself to be. So it's really cool to see what he thinks of as the ideal hero. And throughout the series, we see why he stands for what he does. And a lot of that comes from like the people he's surrounded by and how much they impact him, which is again intrinsic to Peter Parker. I mean, Nate was kind of talking about how Peter's always been kind of a loner. And it's like Peter's always had friends.
Mhm.
He's always found his people to surround him when he needs them and stuff like that. It's just
I
who
think
he lets in on the
Toby's
secret that
version was a
changes stuff.
loner though, right? Like I think
Yes.
like that iteration of Spider-Man went definitely down like the nerd, has no friends, and he's, he's self-conscious and so on and so forth. But yeah, these other iterations of him, like Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, play with this idea that yeah, he's a geek, he's a nerd, he's passionate, he still has friends, still has people that he interacts with, which feels far more like the sort of stuff you would see in comic books, because he always
Mhm.
had friends around him. Even in the animated series, like from the 90s,
I
he
mean, from the
had
beginning,
people.
he's always been friends with the best friends with Harry Osborn. Like
Exactly.
Harry has
Yeah.
been there from the beginning, just like Peter has. So
Mhm.
he's never been alone, truly,
Yes, exactly.
which is really cool about how this series really explores that. And again, you see how the characters that he's surrounding himself is impacting this Peter, and how Hudson is bringing that again to life in his own portrayal of this character. It's just really cool to see that.
Yeah, one of the things I think is so great about Hudson's performance is that as much as he sounds similar to Tom Holland, that gives at least current generations draw to this Spider-Man. They're like, "Oh, I recognize that voice. He sounds like my Spider-Man." But then there's like the Spider-Man persona he takes on reminds me of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man persona. But then you get that Nate, the bits that you're pulling on that remind you of Toby. I think this is all just a really great portrayal by Hudson. He's giving everybody their Spider-Man plus his own
Totally.
version of
Yeah.
it. So,
Very true.
yeah, he's
Very,
doing a
very
great
true.
job.
Yeah. Um, Now, you mentioned we've mentioned Friends, so I'm gonna jump to Friends here. There's two characters that I want to talk about, but we can't really say much about them because we are
Mhm.
spoiler free. The first is Eugene Bird, who takes on the role of Lonnie Lincoln, who I thought is absolutely compelling, and he's so, I don't know, like his journey in a lot of ways is very parallel to Peter Parker in some ways. And I think it's such an interesting dynamic to see these storylines running parallel within sort of the school environment and balancing life. It's just it's what they're balancing, and I think that that's what makes it different, but it also kind of brings it all together at the same time. But Eugene Bird, his voice acting as Lonnie is confident. It has presence, and it can go there when he needs to, with
Mm-hmm.
emotion. And I think he's absolutely outstanding as Lonnie. And Lonnie, I think is a character to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think Lonnie is interesting because he's kind of that guy who he's the jock on the team who is somehow also incredibly smart and likable. And trust me, like
I hate those people.
right, Megan, I've been there where you've got those people in your life where you're like, I want to hate you so much, but I can't because
Yep.
I like you so much. And I've been there where I've gone from those relationships to having a lot of respect for those people. And it's really cool. I'm really happy, like you were saying, Justin. We're getting a good amount of time with Lonnie and his character, and getting to see his character develop over these 10 episodes. He's not necessarily a side character. He is just as much of a main character as Peter. And I was so happy with the amount of time they gave us to see him grow in both good and other ways.
I think one of the coolest things is that the fact that this show is the way that they're reimagining the Spider-Man universe at large, and the fact that to Spider-Man fans who are a bit more knowledgeable, the name Lonnie Lincoln means a lot more than just being starting with two L's. So the fact that we're exploring some of these other characters from Spider-Man's past and history and going about it this route is really refreshing, because most of the time, especially in the origins of the comics, we don't really care about where these villains came from. We just care about how they fight Spider-Man. So
Exactly.
now that we're in an era that we're looking at back at why these people might make the decisions they do, and just I just love the way that this story is portrayed, and the way Eugene Bird brings this dilemma of, a struggling teen with, hard family issues, and just how his journey kind of, again, it mirrors Peter's but goes off at a different direction at some point maybe. So I love
Yes.
it.
Yeah, it's and like you said, the name Lonnie Lincoln will mean a lot to people if you're a Spider-Man fan. So I think it's great. The other friend that I want to talk about, and then I will let you guys go at it with whoever else is Grace Song, who plays Nico Minori. I think, again, this cast is so diverse, from obviously a voice standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. And I think that for me is very refreshing. Growing up, obviously, and seeing a lot of cartoons featuring more predominantly white characters, it's so great to see, a mix of black characters and East Asian, and so on and so forth. It's just really lovely to see, and to see Grace as sort of, the best friend to Peter, is fantastic. Another character that I think fans will appreciate, and will want to follow along with, and understand a little bit more about her history. But I think, again, just like Eugene, just like Hudson, their voices lend such an honest and sincere performance that feels at times vulnerable when it needs to be. And I think that's what you want, these voice performances that believe in their characters, and understand who their characters are. And I think, yeah, for all three, for Hudson, Eugene, and Grace, they all bring that in their performances.
And huge shout out to this writing team for giving a modern storyline with a platonic male female relationship. The fact that we can have two best friends, one's a guy, one's a girl, and they can just be best friends. And I think it's awesome to see. And I love that we've got a Peter Parker that isn't just, he's got one friend and then a love interest. And that love interest takes over so much. We
Mhm.
do get a bit of a love interest in this that I guess spoil, but there definitely is a character, that's going to fill that role. But the way that they spin it, and the way that we get, a friendship with Nico and multiple characters in the show, is fantastic. And I really, really enjoy kind of getting to see the mix of now, not, Peter just doesn't, it's not just a love interest and his aunt and his friend that he has to contend with. There are so many elements that he
Yes.
has to share his time of being
And
Spider-Man with.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. He has
The
to share his
Russian
time.
Spider-Man.
He has to share his time with being Spider-Man, as well as being himself with. And I also really just want to shout out. I think Grace Song does such a good job at playing Nico as an outcast, and giving her a very relatable element that Peter has, but in a different spin on it, right?
Yeah.
A different way of getting to see her in more of that sort of lonely side of things, and how important Peter is to her because of all that is really, really,
Mhm.
really, really well done.
It's what unifies them, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
really makes their bond that much stronger
Yeah.
together. Let's talk about the Osborns first. Coleman Domingo as
Oh,
Norman Osborn.
yeah.
He is playing Peter Parker's mentor in this, what I'll just call an alternate timeline. And I think
Yeah.
again, it's his voice it's perfect for Norman.
It's
It's
so
just
good.
it's
So
so
good.
perfect. It has the confidence. It has that sort of like pretentiousness that that knowledge, that sort of that you would expect. It kind of feels like a Willem Dafoe, but on a different level.
There's
Mm-hmm.
that, he's got that Willem Dafoe like rasp at
Rasp,
the end of a
yes.
Yeah.
sentence where you're like, is that Willem? No, it's very much him.
But again, it's Norman Osborn. Like you said with Lonnie Lincoln, you hear the name, with Norman Osborn, there's something more. You can't
Mm-hmm.
trust him. And what's beautiful about Coleman Domingo's performance is that everything he says, I don't trust him at all. And it's just like you can hear it in his voice that there is nefarious plans or things
But at
that
the
he's
same
doing.
time, you can't trust him, but you know that what he's doing, or what he believes what he's doing is
Is right.
the most
Yeah.
important thing. Like he
Yeah.
believes he's got a mission and he's the only one who can fulfill it.
True.
And just the way that he can commands a room
Yes.
and just will take over a scene at times. It's so good. And
Mhm.
again, I was just waiting for him somewhat of a scientist at one point, because again, he is so good at
He
If
sounds
they
like
drop
like,
that, oh.
Maybe
if
next
they
season.
did that, it'd be
Spoiler, they
incredible.
didn't. So
But yeah, he does such a good job of again making you think of that Norman and how maniacal he was. But we're seeing again just Norman Osborn, no alter ego, just the businessman, and how again we still can't trust it just off that our preconceived notions, and how he's capitalizing on that. It's so good.
And the way he's delivering these lines, like you said, Justin, yeah, you can't trust him, but he's saying things like, shout out to these writers for writing for this character, because he's saying things that both you and Peter are like, please, I really want that to be
Yeah.
what
Mhm.
happens. But in the
Mm.
back of your mind, you're just like, it's not going to turn out that way.
He's like this heartfelt, empathetic manipulator. He
Mhm.
makes you feel like he
That's
cares
good.
about you, but
Mm.
he's doing that to make Peter his,
Yeah. His own, right?
Yeah.
He's exploiting Peter. He wants something other than just to help Peter,
Yeah.
and that is the intention that you can hear in his voice.
And you know what I think also? It grows throughout the
Yes.
show. So you'll feel it at the beginning, but man, he builds
There's a
that
line.
character
Yes.
throughout. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of, I mentioned with Lonnie Lincoln a character that you just want to hate but can't. I think Harry Osborn is kind of
Mhm.
in that same camp, but I think it's really cool. I think Spider-Man and the Spider-Man stories have always done such a good job with the element of never judge a book by its cover. And I really like the twist that they took with Harry. I think Zeno Robinson plays him super charming and delightful, and I think there's going to be a lot of things about Harry in this story that are going to surprise people.
Mhm. Absolutely. There's a lot of surprises. There's a
Oh, yeah.
lot. A big one, as I mentioned, Charlie Cox.
We're allowed
Uh,
to talk about that? I didn't think we were allowed to talk about it.
Well, he's in the voice cast. He's been featured in the trailers.
Let's go for it then, dude.
Daredevil's in this. He's in the trailers. There are other things that I was surprised by upon viewing the screeners that have now been shown in a more recent trailer that I don't want to talk about, like some of the other voice
Mm-mm.
actors that we've
Mhm.
mentioned. But I will, Charlie Cox is in there. You can't help but see that name and know who he's going to play. And yes, Daredevil is in this show. It's interesting. I'm that's all I'll say. Like I just think it's so great that again we have this other layer. And when we talked about story, when we get to story in a bit, we talk about just connecting things back to the MCU. This is a huge part to connecting that all back to the MCU.
Well, and I think one thing that Spider-Man as a franchise has always done is really overload you with characters, but in a really fluid way that makes
Mhm.
sense. Every single Spider-Man movie, I feel like, features a million different characters.
Yeah.
And this show is not void of that. You
Mhm.
will get so many characters that you're not prepared to see, and it's awesome.
But they fit the story at least. Like, the
Yeah.
biggest issue with the Sony universe with all the villain movies was that they were throwing these names and just to use them, and then they didn't amount to nothing and all this stuff, and
Mhm.
it was just
No, yeah.
felt like such disservice, whereas this show, the names that they're mentioning and the people that they introduce, you spend enough time with them or there's enough attention drawn to them that you know that something will come from that, or they care enough to be like, "We know you wanted this, so here you
So
go," type
here,
thing, and
yeah.
I loved every aspect of that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really want every single Sony Pictures creative decision maker to be strapped to a chair and like typed eyes open and watch every episode of this, because we're talking about the fact that yes, there is a large rogues gallery of characters, and to your point, Darcy, Spider-Man, this show proves why Spider-Man needs to be in those stories, and it
Mhm.
works so well, and I think it's so nice to see them in a Marvel-led project again after No Way Home. I just want to quickly just jump back to Charlie Cox, because I do want to mention that, because Megan, I think we've talked a lot about getting to see actors go from a live action portrayal to an animation side, and how sometimes they don't manage to pull it off.
Yeah.
Charlie Cox is the exact opposite of that. Like, I'm getting shivers now. Uh, thinking about the first time you hear his voice in this show, it is so good. It translates so well, and I would love to see,
An
with the
offer.
popularity of this character, I'd love to see a spin-off for Daredevil in this animation style. Like, if like Marvel
That
Animation,
ain't gonna happen.
honestly, if we're getting a live
Well,
action one, I want an animated one too. Call
Now
me
you're
I was
getting
greedy. I
gonna
don't
greedy,
care.
say,
man.
I think Charlie Cox might say yes to that because I think this is kind of following in the footsteps of his She-Hulk role, where it's a much more lighter
Yeah.
take on the
Yeah.
character, especially because he's fighting or he's sorry, especially because he's interacting with Spider-Man in this
Right.
thing, who's known for his
Mhm.
quippiness. So
But look,
the fact that we got to see again a lighter-hearted Daredevil, if that's the route they want to take, maybe the animated series is when he moves out to California and actually has a somewhat decent life out
no,
there.
no,
So
you keep Charlie Cox and Daredevil
no, I'm
as
saying he
this.
actually moved to California at one point. That is a
Well,
legitimate comic storyline.
well, that would be interesting to see it, especially with his relationship with She-Hulk. It would be interesting. But I like the idea that he can pop into these shows, whether live action or animated, and still make an impact. And yes, his character is adjusted for the said property, but he still has his own anchor point, which is his show.
He's like the
And
R2D2 and C3PO of Marvel.
sure,
I don't
he'll
know.
just show up everywhere. But it's interesting too because the show will end just before we get Daredevil.
Hmm.
I think it's like just at the end of February, and I think it's March, if I'm not mistaken, that we get Daredevil. So it is going to go from an animated depiction of Daredevil into a live action, full on show for the character. Okay, well, with that, let's move into talking about the story. I know we've been kind of like dancing around it.
We've been
I
thwipping
think
around it.
thwipping, there you go, swinging around it. There you go, thwipping,
Swinging.
swinging.
Yay.
There you go. But yes, we've been swinging around it, and I think that what's really impactful about this series, and what this story does, is that it has a very distinct what if take on the Spider-Man, the MCU Spider-Man origin story. I think the world building elements are there with fresh takes on familiar characters, but reimagining Peter Parker's journey, and the story stays very true to the essence of Spider-Man while embracing new possibilities. And I think that connection to the MCU with twists on events and characters and the overall narrative, it very much subtly ties back to the larger universe and maintains a very strong focus on Peter and his personal challenges. Because, like I was saying, like I feel like the show is more about Peter and what he has to deal with, which is always the case. But with this what if take, it really does allow for unexpected twists and creative risks that keep the story engaging and unpredictable. And I think at its core, the series delves into sort of themes that of like responsibility and identity, presenting a deeply human portrayal of Peter's struggle and that balance of being, personal life and the duties of Spider-Man. So this, again, it's keeping what we know from the origins and the story of Spider-Man, but in viewing so many creative twists and interesting elements. Like I said, Norman Osborn is Peter's mentor. And, in our MCU, we had Tony Stark. So there is that dichotomy between those two. It's a very interesting way to understand how this Peter is being shaped by someone, as Meg, you said, someone who doesn't have the best intentions for him, that is perceiving that he does have good intentions, but nobody trust, we don't trust him as an audience, knowing his history.
Yeah, the story of this one was, again, something that I think I needed time to get into. It didn't immediately pick up at an exciting point for me, which is funny because the first episode very much starts off with a bang.
Mhm.
But I think getting to know the characters, because it's such a different take on where Peter is and how Peter gets his powers and how he handles them and navigates that, and the duties he finds himself responsible for, uh it took me a second to get into it, but then it really became one of those shows that I was like doing stuff while watching and slowly putting those things down and very much focusing on it, because this story flows so well and introduces you to all these characters, but in meaningful ways, so they don't feel like a waste. Um, and yeah, like you said, Justin, it's just so much about Peter instead of the story of Spider-Man, which is
Mhm.
Yeah,
cool.
I think they're very much with this show. They're showing their work, right? I think the
Mhm.
intentionality is there in every moment in this story, and I just like I said with the look and the feel. I think you can really tell the story that they want to tell, the messages that they want to convey. And I love that we're getting an early Spider-Man, but we don't have to spend too much time on the how of it all. We can really just sort of dig right into those early moments with him, because they could have gone the traditional route, right? They could have gone that route that we've seen 1,000 times, but they don't. And like you said, Justin, they slowly start to bring in those elements. I think Jeff and the team have managed to give us a story that is kind of like comfort food with a twist. Like it's like the mac and cheese, but then like there's like some butter chicken in there. You're like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And I think it plays. They play really well with the balance of Easter
Someone's
eggs.
hungry.
That I am a little hungry, but I love that they play with the balance of Easter eggs and references that won't leave any audience behind. Right? You've got
Mhm.
your comic book fans of Spider-Man. Maybe you've got, and I'm sure there's obviously a lot of crossover, but maybe you've got your comic book side of fans who haven't really loved the MCU side of things. They're going to have things they love. You've got your MCU fans who've never touched a comic book in their life who are going to love some moments in this. There is a very specific Tom Holland MCU moment reference thing that happens that had me just absolutely screaming. So there's so much to love in this show. And the only other thing I will say in terms of the pacing for the show, and I told you this, Darcy, when we were on the phone earlier, was that I think there were two moments in the entirety of the 10 episodes. I think we complain a lot. Well, not complain. We criticize a lot of
You
shows
complain.
for saying that there's oh, I just wish there was two more episodes. Right? I just
That's
wish
a
we had a
you thing,
little bit
bro.
more
That
time
is a
with
you
these
thing
characters.
mostly.
Yeah,
But
I guess
then
my
other
blanket
times,
is all
other
of us.
times we say, "Oh, there was too many episodes. We didn't need these 3 extra episodes. What
Right.
have you? I think it could have been tighter." I
Mhm.
think this show, there are 2 moments within the 10 episodes that we watched where I was starting to feel that sort of slowdown, but both of them managed to surprise me so much with their payoff. There's a side story that involves a character learning to drive. That's all I'll say. And the way that that story wraps up, or that side moment wraps up, is so incredibly rewarding. So I think if there's ever a moment in these 10 episodes where you kind of feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to be here at this part of the story, give it a minute, and I'm pretty sure you'll be pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan of like Spider-Man stories across the board, I love the refreshing spin on it and the fact that almost everything that we know about Spider-Man has a chance to be reinvented throughout this show. And I think that the fact that that has me so hopeful for what's to come in future seasons, especially what we got throughout this season. So the way they treat the characters and again how they're spinning it, they clearly are fans, like you said, Justin. And the story, this is a story that all Spider-Man fans want to tell, and they're just doing such a good job, bringing these ideas to life and just through these characters and stuff. I love everything about this series, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point, it's not just the MCU stuff that can get a what if twist. It's anything and everything that we've come to know, from comic books to other movie references, that can find its way into this story, and subtly hint back at those moments. But yeah, I think that this is 10 episodes that are well paced, well earned, throughout, and yeah, it's a great time. Okay, with all of that said, I think it's time that we get into our overall thoughts, because we did get all 10 episodes, so we can give a score.
Wow.
Right, we haven't done that in a while, because we're always getting like 4 or 5, whatever. But we're grateful that we got all 10 episodes, so we can actually give a full rating on this. So Darcy, why don't you kick things off for us with your final thoughts and score, which will be out of 1 to 5 webbed up thugs. Darcy, why don't you
Webbed
kick
up
things
thugs.
off?
Yeah, I think my score is going to be pretty obvious. I just said I love everything about this show, and I truly do. It's such a fun take on the Spider-Man story as we know it, and the animation style is just such a unique way of telling this story, and it's so intrinsically Spider-Man. From the moment you start watching, you feel like you're like the comic pages are coming to life, even outside the moments when they really identify it as a comic book with the panels. So, yeah, just everything about this show is just a delight, and I think Spider-Man fans across the board will love this show and this series, and instantly clamor for a season 2. So yeah, this one is easily 5 out of 5 webbed up thugs. No one's getting away from this Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, just on that note about season 2, our friends at the Movie Podcast did scoop up a good little bit of news from Brad Winderbaum. It does look like the show has been greenlit up till season 3, and season
Woo!
2, all the scripts are done with 50% of animatics completed. So it does look like we will be getting 2 more seasons of the show, because I guess that's sort of everyone was wondering after watching these 10 episodes, is like, is there going to be more? Because I could definitely go for more. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool that we'll be getting more stories from this universe of Spider-Man. Nate, why don't you go ahead with
All
your
right.
final thoughts and score?
I mean, either, I guess Hudson's a really good actor, because, or maybe he didn't know. I don't know. Maybe when we talked to him, he didn't know. But that's really exciting that we're going to get 3 seasons of the show, which I think it's interesting, right? Because I think, again, looking at this season at surface value within the lens of what we've gotten from Marvel Animation in the past, I think you could sort of start off this show and think like it's not as hard hitting as something like X-Men 97 in its dialogue or its themes, but I think very much like the look of the show and like the experience of Meg that you shared or that I shared, once you understand the intentions of what they're going for, it's going to shift your perspective if you're feeling that way at the beginning of this season. I think the intention and motivation of this series and just the passion and love for Spider-Man is in every single frame of this show, and I think it absolutely lives up to the quality for anything that we've gotten from Marvel Animation in the past. And I know that Marvel Animation hasn't released nearly as much as the live action side of Marvel, but I think they've just been delivering so consistently with what they've given us. I know that we've loved pretty much anything and everything that they've put out, including those little Groot shorts. But I think for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, once you've seen all 10 episodes, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed not to recognize the passion that's in this production. So I'm going to give this show a solid 5 out of 5 webbed up thugs.
Nice. Meg.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned throughout this episode, it was a slow burn for me. I didn't start off with the first episode being super enthralled, but by the 10th, I was like ready for season 2. The animation was a little jarring to me at first. Again, I wasn't so sure how I felt about the 2D stylized design with the 3D animation. It just took me a little bit of getting used to, but the story was amazing. Like we've said multiple times, any Spider-Man fan of any generation is going to find something to love in this show, if not just for Easter eggs and characters being brought in. So I'm going to have to give this one a 4 out of 5 webbed up thugs. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm with you all, mostly with Darcy and Nate.
No, it's fair. It's fair.
I feel like, yeah, again, I think like Nate said, it's understanding intention. I think there's been enough talk about this show leading up to this day of release that, all of it was there, the Steve Ditko style, the sort of retro callback mixed with modern. So I think I very much knew what I was getting myself into when watching it. But yes, the animation was a little bit jarring, I think, in terms of maybe the frame rates in my mind, at least. But I think, again, I think Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is a spectacular blend of the nostalgia with innovation and heart. I think that 2D 3D hybrid animation that we've come to know and love from Marvel Animations is on full display here. But now it has that inspired Steve Ditko art style, and it's just very classic Spider-Man. It feels like it's almost like they've layered it on as a new skin over top of what they know from a 3D perspective, adding those elements. But this show has such a vibrant aesthetic that with this sort of moving comic book look with the panels and the sort of what if imagining of the MCU Spider-Man origins really do play with familiar, fresh, and just sensational surprises in general. I think the show delivers on the idea of balancing familiarity and creativity. And I think at its core, like I was saying before, this is a show that really does capture Peter Parker's timeless struggle with responsibility and identity, making it deeply relatable. I think this series is a must watch for Spidey fans, old and new. To the point of what you were saying, Nate, some might compare to X-Men 97 or What If. My note to that is do not compare, because this show is not created to be a continuation of those things. It is a whole new writing team. It's a whole new look. This is its own show that deserves its own two legs to stand on and does not deserve to be compared to anything else. Those shows are great. Don't get me wrong. I love them all. Like you said, Nate, we've loved all of the Marvel animation stuff. But to kind of compare it and say, oh yeah, it's not necessarily as mature or it's not as hard hitting with its themes or topics. It's a whole other world. It's a whole other universe. It's Spider-Man. And I think in terms of, as we've discussed here, uh, with Spider-Man, it is done just like how X-Men 97 was, from fans who love X-Men and love the stories. This is done by Spider-Man fans who love Spider-Man and want to really lean into that. And I think that they've created something incredibly special. So yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 webbed up thugs for me too. Awesome. Well, that is it for our spoiler-free review for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is out today, the first 2 episodes. Again, really crazy release strategy. You can go on to Marvel Studios Canada or Marvel Studios, and you can see the release strategy, but it is going to be over the course of 4 weeks. You'll get all 10 episodes, so you'll enjoy. You don't got to wait 10 weeks. You get more episodes quicker, faster. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. If you enjoy the show and you enjoy the first 2 episodes, please feel free to let us know by writing into the show at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric. As mentioned previously, we do have some interviews with some fine folks from this show. Nate and Darcy had the opportunity to talk to Hudson Thames, the voice of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, as well as head writer and executive producer Jeff Trammell, and Mel Zwire, the supervising director of this show. Great little conversation. They share who their Spider-Man was and what inspired them, which is a really great little notion to understand how all the Spider-Man sort of influence this show, which is really, really cool. You can check those out on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/geekcentric or on podcast feeds, wherever you listen to podcasts. We got more interviews on our YouTube channel that you can check out, like our most recent interviews before those, which were with the cast of Goosebumps. And then we also have some upcoming interviews with some casts from Mythic Quest. We have some spoiler-free reviews for Mythic Quest Season 4, as well as Severance Season 2. That show is popping off. It's already episode 2, and people are loving it, which is great. We're excited for where that show is going to go. And if you want to hear how excited you can listen to our spoiler-free review. As I mentioned, a lot more to come for the foreseeable future. We got more interviews, things that we're working out. at the very moment. We got some trips planned, but other than that, it was great to get together and talk a little Spider-Man. So thank you,
Always
Darcy,
is.
Nate, and Megan, for joining me for this spoiler-free review. And as we say,
Love ya.
Bye.
Laters.
peace.